A comparison of the Parthenon and the Temple of Mars Ultor. Both of these drawings are shown at the same scale. The Parthenon is on the left, the Temple of Mars Ultor on the right. Notice that the Doric-style columns of the Parthenon were 35 feet tall, whereas the Corinthian-style columns of the Temple of Mars Ultor were 60 feet tall. The Parthenon was much smaller than its later Roman counterpart. However, the sculptural program of the Parthenon was much more extensive. The Greeks invented the Doric-style column capital, which was fairly simple. The Greeks also invented the showy Corinthian-style column capital, but Roman architects made the style their own and used it almost exclusively. These are photographs of actual fragments of Roman Corinthian capitals and parts of columns and friezes and cornices that survive from the Forum of Augustus in Rome. This is a reconstruction of the urban context for the Parthenon on the Athenian Acropolis. Note the asymmetrical, non-centralized layout of all of the buildings on the Acropolis, with the exception of the Propylaea, the gatehouse to the Acropolis, which was on axis with a great staircase leading from below. The Parthenon, notably, was not on axis with the entrance to the Acropolis. Here is a detail of the 3D reconstruction of the Parthenon. The Parthenon had a front and a back, but the design was possible to view from all sides. This aspect of the architecture of the Parthenon is emphasized by this 3D reconstruction video. Note how all four sides of the Parthenon would have been visible from anywhere in the lower city of Athens. The interior sacred chamber of the Parthenon, called the cella, was dominated by a colossal statue of Athena, which stood on a decorated pedestal. The interior of the temple was dark, but it might have been partially illuminated by windows in the roof. Now, the Temple of Mars Ultor in the Forum of Augustus in Rome, built approximately 450 years later in Rome by Rome's first emperor, Augustus. In contrast to the Parthenon, the Temple of Mars Ultor was inside a closed complex. Views of the temple from the outside would have been very limited. The visual focus of the temple was on the front facade. This was very different than the visual impression given by the earlier Parthenon. Here we see a reconstruction of the front facade and the pediment of the temple. The pediment doesn't survive today, but scholars think that it was decorated with statues of Mars, Venus, and Fortuna. The inscription in gilded bronze letters also does not survive. Here is a 3D computerized reconstruction of central Rome during the 2nd century AD, with focus on the Forum of Augustus and the Temple of Mars Ultor in the upper right. Notice the isolation of the Temple of Mars Ultor from the outside. Also, once again, notice the emphasis on the front facade and on the magnificent Corinthian columns and capitals shown here in the reconstruction, and the pedimental sculpture with Mars standing at the height of the apex of the pediment's triangle. The square in front of the the Temple of Mars Ultor, was a wide open space. This was another big difference in comparison to the Parthenon of Athens. Here we see another computer-generated reconstruction, this one of the interior of the Temple of Mars Ultor, showing 3 figures: Mars in the center, deified Julius Caesar on the right, and Venus, or Aphrodite, on the left. This is a hypothetical reconstruction. The sculptural program from the temple's cella does not survive. It is quite possible that Mars was the only statue that stood on the pedestal. This digital walkthrough takes us into the cella. Here the doors open, and inside we see the dimly lit interior and the great triad of Mars, Julius Caesar, and Venus.